Ahead on America This Week, United We Stand.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus.
I don't want people to be frightened. I don't want to create panic.
It's a very serious pandemic, and the administration, before I was even involved, has done a lot of great things to move the ball forward to minimize the harm from it.
I'm talking with the president's new coronavirus advisor, Dr. Scott Atlas.
Here's the reality. It's not jaywalking. You want to go to jail for 10 years or you want to do something more productive.
I'm also talking with the Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt. Senior Trump-Pence campaign advisor, Mercedes Schlapp, is also here.
It should not matter, and you may be a little surprised at the conclusion, that Breonna Taylor is black, the law enforcement officers may be white. What we should be outraged about is that we've lost lives for no reason at all.
And you don't want to miss my conversation with talk show host Armstrong Williams. That and so much more right now in America This Week, United We Stand. Welcome to America This Week, United We Stand. I'm Eric Bolling. We are now 100 plus days into protests and riots, 7 weeks away from Election Day, and more than 6 months into a global pandemic. Joining me now is Dr. Scott Atlas, President Trump's newest coronavirus advisor. Dr. Atlas, thank you for being here. You are the man of the hour. Listen, I got to put all this other stuff, this he said, she said, these unnamed sources aside. You talk to the president. I've seen you talk to him. I've seen you whisper into his ear. Tell us what the president believes the dangers are of COVID-19. What is real firsthand account?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. I can only say this, that he's views it as a very, very serious issue. There is no understatement of the problem here. Lots of Americans have lost their lives, and there's no way to minimize that fact, and there's no attempt to. It's a very serious pandemic, and the administration, before I was even involved, has done a lot of great things to move the ball forward to minimize the harm from it. And, we all know about all the efforts in Operation Warp Speed to develop a vaccine. We know all about all the resources that were developed, that we're doing over, we've done over 90 million tests. I mean, it's a huge array of things, including mobilizing resources to nursing homes and point-of-care testing now going to every single nursing home, all kinds of things. But there's no minimizing this. Right. In fact, he's very concerned, like every normal person would be. Sir,
so one of the big political footballs of the season, we're a couple of months to the election, and the vaccine, you mentioned it right there, the vaccine. President Trump believes there will be a vaccine prior to the election, November 3rd. Dr. Fauci says don't count on it. What say you?
Well, I mean, what I've been told, and I'm not a primary person involved in the vaccine development, but I'm in the meetings that discuss it to some extent, and they're on track to have almost or somewhere around or maybe a little bit more than 100 million doses by the end of the year. The production is ongoing while the trials are going. There are several vaccine candidates. There's been an optimization of the process so that, we already have in 7 months after knowing the RNA, the genetic sequence of the virus, we already have phase 3 trials, which are the last sort of phase of clinical trials going, which is amazing. And it's hard to predict. It's essentially impossible to be accurate in a prediction about when this will be available, but they're on track to having it by the end of the year. But it's all determined by the data. I mean, no one, by the way, is seeing the data. The data is not visible to the president. It's not visible to us in the White House at all. Right. It's a black box of data that's being watched by a data and safety monitoring board of outside experts. It has nothing to do with what the president says or wants to happen, because we all want the vaccine. I wish I had the vaccine right now. I would take it immediately. The point here for the American public to know is really, and this is really critical, there are no safety corners being cut. There is no influence of the trial being done by anyone. There is no political pressure whatsoever. That is is ludicrous, and in fact, it's doing the public really a heinous disservice to push that narrative.
Let me turn this a little bit, and no one in their right mind thought that the FBI would ever be involved in politics of a presidential election, yet we found Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and Comey were involved, heavily involved in trying to get Hillary Clinton elected rather than Donald Trump. You said by the end of the year. That's 2 months prior, 2 months after the election. November 3rd leaves 60 days almost till the end of the year. Is there any slow walking? I mean, listen, I'm going to get beat up. I know they're going to beat me up for asking this. Is there any politics being played with the timing of a vaccine?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, like I'm not a political person, even though I may be portrayed as one. But I mean, that's the way this is going is that there is a defined process for safety and efficacy. And I think we all know on the task force, every single person agrees this is an objective process. It could be done sooner than the end of the year. I'm saying that it's on track to be by the end of the year. Who knows how? No one knows exactly when, because it's all about the number of events. It's a number of infections. It's a number of patients who have positive and negative results. It's a matter of statistical power,
right.
And the end result will be determined by the people who are seeing the data. And
right.
Those people are not the President of the United States. He has no influence on how quickly this is going, other than to expedite the process that he has done. And this is something to celebrate. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and to think somehow that people are undermining the safety issue is really unconscionable. Those kinds of people that are basically dissuading people from taking the vaccine, in my view, are killing people. That's how serious this is. This is really political malfeasance to undermine what Americans feel safe about. We have the best FDA drug procedures. We have the best vaccine development, safety-wise, in the world. And I can tell you, there's not a single person on the task force that wouldn't take the vaccine right now if we had it.
You know, interesting you say that. I asked that very question to Dr. Fauci. He's been on the show a couple of times. And when this whole hydroxychloroquine issue was coming up, I asked him, sir, would you take it? Would your family take it? He said, I wouldn't tell my family to take it or not take it. I said, would you take it? And he said, yeah, I guess I would take it. So there you have it. Dr. Scott Atlas would take the vaccine when it's ready. They may ask you to take it first. You're okay with that? Quick answer.
Absolutely. I consider myself lucky.
Final question, sir. Masks. There are those who say masks save lives. Can you tell us, is there an efficacy to masks that we should all be wearing masks all over the place?
Well, I mean, there are several questions inside that question, but I'll just summarize it by saying that, you know, masks, the policy of the president that he has said very clearly, I completely agree with. Wear masks when you cannot socially distance. That's a reasonable policy. But to say that somebody should be wearing a mask in the middle of the desert when they're all alone, or wearing a mask when you run through the park all alone, or wearing a mask when you're inside your car all alone, you know, I can't sign on to that kind of policy because it's irrational and it's not a science-based plan. I think the thoughtful plan is the point of all these things is to save lives. That's the point of all these policy things. And so when you cannot socially distance, wear a mask. I think that's a completely reasonable policy. The president has said it very clearly multiple times. I have said it very clearly multiple times. And I think everybody should, I think it's logical and it's common sense. And, you know, it's just a reasonable policy to go by. I mean, you know, we're trying to do everything we can to make this safer for everybody and get past this pandemic.
Dr. Scott Atlas, thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has called for the removal or renaming of certain iconic monuments around D.C. Joining me now is the Secretary of the Interior, David Bernhardt, whose office oversees the protection of our national monuments. Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us. What do you have to say to Mayor Muriel Bowser about what she wants to do? Remove, rename, or relocate monuments?
Well, I was pretty clear that this was an outrageous suggestion that she received, and a few days later they said we didn't really mean remove or reconstitute, we meant, reinterpret. So the bottom line is the monuments that are part of the National Capitol Mall will remain in place, and they will stand for time immemorial, absent Congress taking some action otherwise, which would require an entire act of Congress to be signed in by the president. So they're here to stay. They're wonderful icons for the world, and they are beacons of hope to Americans and worldwide, and they're going to stand free and tall.
President Trump recently said that once he put a 10-year potential jail sentence on damaging or vandalism to the monuments, it stopped. Is that an accurate assessment? Has the vandalism and the pulling down of statues stopped across the country, or are there still hot spots?
The president was really speaking in regard to federal monuments. And so what we did see is with the president's bold action, with very clear direction to us, to ensure that we are protecting the monuments, ensure that if a crime is committed and a monument is defaced or destroyed, we investigate that crime and then take our investigation to the Department of Justice and ask them to prosecute, and they prosecute to the full extent of the law. By providing that clear direction and then also sending the signal to the criminals and the destroyers of these precious items that a harsh penalty would be coming, we saw a marked drop, a precipitous drop in activity. And here's the reality. It's not jaywalking. You want to go to jail for 10 years or you want to do something more productive. And I think people decided to do other things. And so they've really avoided trying to take down our great national monuments.
Mr. Secretary, nothing works like a perp walk. Have you actually seen any perp walks? Has anyone been held accountable for the damage they've inflicted on our national monuments?
What we really have seen is, these folks are really good at using their phones and posting things on Facebook. And once they started to realize when we were heading after them, we actually have had criminals calling and saying, hey, I'm over here, come get me.
David Bernhardt, thank you so much for your time. Coming up on America This Week, United We Stand, looking for ways to move past race. I'm talking with Armstrong Williams next.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
We stand, America.
United we stand.
You know him from his talk show, and now he's released a brand new book, What Black and White America Must Do Now, which looks at how race is important in America. Host of the Armstrong Williams Show, Armstrong Williams joins us. So let's go right to it, Armstrong. The book is a very provocative title, very provocative. I heard we got to get him out and talk about this. What must black and white America do? I assume it's different for each.
You know, one of the things that we must do, Eric, and thank you for having me on, is that we must get back to one of the cornerstones of this founding of our nation, and that is this rugged individualism. You know, I read Ayn Rand's Fountainhead during the 70s, where she talked about what happens when you can group people in sort of like of a herd, and they lose their individualism and their individuality, and they begin to believe that they think as a herd and not as someone with their own character, their own accountability and responsibility. And if you fast forward to where we are now, we can take the situation with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, or Arbery. And what happens oftentimes when you have these situations with law enforcement, and if the person who's losing their life is black and the person that's causing it in law enforcement is white, then it blows up in the media. It should not matter, and you may be a little surprised at the conclusion, that Arbery or Breonna Taylor is black, the law enforcement officers may be white. What we should be outraged about is that we've lost lives for no reason at all. There's no reason why an American who's a human being sleeping in their bed 2 a.m. in the morning should be shot several times for no reason at all by law enforcement. There's no reason for us watching a video of any human being, if it were you, your grandson, some factory worker, some farmer, should have a law enforcement officer have their knee on their neck for almost 9 or 10 minutes and they lose their lives. And what happens when you reduce it to race, you lose the full understanding, the full meaning of what happened, because a piece of all of humanity is destroyed. And while it may look this way today, it could be you next week and somebody else next month. And we must cry out, because we're better than that as human beings, and we're decent.
So Armstrong, let me, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I see with the Black Lives Matter movement, I see a lot of young white kids trying to embrace the Black Lives Matter movement. Does that help things or hurt things, or just muddle the whole issue?
You know, there we go again. It doesn't matter to me that the kids are white. What matters to me is that a lot of these kids are spoiled. They have no idea what it is taken to build America to what it is in today. They don't understand that freedom is imperfect, America is imperfect, and while they want to condemn and make America seem like it is a racist place, it's much more than that. There are people who find themselves in abject poverty. The Great Society programs of the 60s were supposed to move many people out of their situation and help them realize the potential of the American dream, and that did not happen. You take these issues like race and you use it to balkanize and divide people, and people turn it into an industry, and these people continue to suffer, and you become the proxy for their vote. What we've got to do, yes, these kids out here protesting, and many of these kids are looting, and they're the reasons for the violence and the fire that we see at some of these police stations, but obviously they don't understand and appreciate the values of America. Right. And a lot of these kids, their parents took them to private school, took them to college, dropped them off, left them in the hands of these professors, and when they came back to graduation, they didn't even recognize these kids anymore. They've been indoctrinated with this liberalism, with this socialism, with this anti-capitalism, with this anti-Americanism. They believe everything is about race, and America is much more than this. When you talk about race, you haven't even scratched the surface of what is wrong and what's going on in this country and what needs to change and how you go about changing it.
I got about 30 seconds, Armstrong. Keep it really tight for me. Is there, yes or no, systemic racism in America?
Yes, and you will always have people who have in their heart, they make judgments about people based on what they look like and what they sound like. No white person had a monopoly on that. No black person has a monopoly on that. Anybody can do that in a position of power. If you don't have power, you can make people feel a certain kind of way.
We're going to leave it right there. You can catch his show. It's called the Armstrong Williams Show. Also, the book is called What Black and White America Must Do Now. Boy, I got to tell you, there is some... As a very timely book, a very provocative title, timely book, Armstrong Williams. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, she's helping lead the Trump-Pence campaign to a possible victory in November. Senior Trump-Pence campaign advisor Mercedes Schlapp is next. Now take a look at this. Check out this Border Patrol agent. That's right, the dog whose name I'm not allowed to disclose, sniffing through the U.S. mail facility in Miami. These dogs find coke, meth, and fentanyl literally every hour of every day. Illegal and deadly drugs that would make their way into our communities. The men, women, and canines who are at the forefront of the epidemic on drug-related deaths in America are very literally saving lives. Next week, I'll bring you video from a massive West Coast drug offload. If you want to help out in this fight, this critical fight, please go to ericchasefoundation.org. Together, we will save lives of our most precious assets, our children. This week, many of you helped out. The top donors this week were Annie K. And Tina, a signed copy of my book, Wake Up America, is on its way to each of all three of you.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American
United we stand.
We stand American strong.
City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all.
American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand American
United we stand.
We stand American
United we stand.
America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, points out how rough and tumble politics shape opinion in every region in our country. We tell American stories, stories that touch our people, determine our politics, focus on the future of America.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America this week.
Well, they don't want to give a stimulus bill because they want our country, the Democrats, to do poorly because they think that helps them with their election. See, I don't think so. I think it's bad for their election.
That was President Trump speaking to our Sinclair station WPEC in West Palm Beach earlier in the week. And the fight in Congress to pass a new relief bill goes on. Let's go now to senior Trump-Pence campaign advisor and former White House Director of Strategic Communications, Mercedes Schlapp. Mercedes, thank you for being here. We'll talk about that in a minute, but we had some news this week. President Trump has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Wow, that's your guy.
Who would have ever believed it? But it was really such exciting news. And I think part of this obviously has to do with his commitment and working closely with Israel and UAE to come up with this peace agreement. As we know, it's taken decades for any president to accomplish something like this. And it's a move in the right direction where we're seeing progress between an Arab nation, hopefully getting more Arab nations to cooperate and work with the Israeli government. And what we know is that this will lead to Middle East prosperity and peace. And it's why President Trump knew he could get the deal done, as you know him well, and he accomplished that. And that's why we're very excited about the news that he was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize.
You know, it really, we can play around with these things, Nobel Peace Prize, but the reality is very important to the Middle East, to the peace process, to the safety and security of the whole world, really. I mean, it's a lot of the conflict that goes on between Israel and the Arab nations. It sparks a lot of animosity to the United States because we are such a close partner of Israel. Jared Kushner, I believe, is a big integral part of making that happen as well. President Trump, he doesn't ever seem to get the credit for some of the things he's done on the world stage.
Yeah, there's no question. And I mean, we could go down the list of ending endless wars. That's something that the president has focused on. We saw this week that the president is bringing troops back home from Iraq. And I think it's very telling. He completely understands the importance of how we should use our American military in a responsible fashion, as opposed to just trying to be involved in every single conflict across the globe. Obviously, we've seen the president work in stabilizing the Korean Peninsula by working with the South Korean leader, as well as, meeting with the North Korean leader as well. And he just understands what it takes to bring the different parties together, try to find, the middle ground there. Yep. And promote peace across the globe.
Mercy, I only have about a minute or so, and let's talk a little bit about the battleground states: North Carolina, Florida, Michigan, Virginia, Ohio. In 2016, President Trump, or candidate Trump, was winning. He was doing very well in battlegrounds, but he was losing the general popular vote. It seems to be different this time. He's still trailing in the battleground states. What's the strategy to get him up on top in those absolutely important election winning or losing states, in the 5 or 6 that I just mentioned, including Virginia?
Well, we've seen the polls wrong in 2016. I think this time around what we're seeing, at least in our internal polls, is that the president is leading or tied in these battleground states. In fact, what you're also starting to see, Eric, is that Joe Biden is on defense. He's having to spend money in states like Minnesota. Let's remember, a Republican hasn't won Minnesota. Republican presidential candidate has not won Minnesota since 1972. And the public polls show Biden and the president tied. You've also got New Hampshire, Nevada. Again, Joe Biden on defense, spending money there. He's having to spend money to court black voters. And so I think you're seeing that strategy coming from the Biden campaign. You've seen him weak with Latino voters in Miami-Dade County, a crucial county for the Democrats to at least gain some footing there. And so look, I've been on the road for a long time with the Women for Trump bus tour. And what I see out there in terms of enthusiasm, in terms of the ground game that we built in the last 2 years, we're in a strong position to win come November.
Mercedes Schlapp, everyone, thank you so much. And as always, Mercy, good talking to you.
Great talking to you.
Never miss an episode of America This Week or United We Stand. Just set your DVR. We've got a complete list of times and cities on Facebook. That's facebook.com/America Bowling, all one word. Our shows and key interviews are also now on YouTube. Subscribe to our America This Week YouTube channel.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time.
We stand America.
United we stand.
We stand America.
United we stand.
Well, that's a wrap from the D.C. swamp. Remember, you can help make it a little less swampier here when you vote in November. There were a lot of people at the beach last weekend for the big Labor Day celebration, the unofficial end of summer. Well, some places skipped fall and went straight to winter. Here's some video out of Rapid City, South Dakota, where they saw a 50-degree swing in just days. You guys can keep the snow there. We're not quite ready to say goodbye to summer yet over here. Have a great night, everybody.